Hello, everybody. I'm Silva Harapetian. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Silva Harapetian Show. Today, we're going to be talking about sports and not just what's been happening in sports during the pandemic, but what's been happening in sports in the last week and why we should care. Whether you're a sports fan or not, this is an important time in history. And there's no one better I could think of to talk about this than my dear friend, Don Bell. Don is a sports director in Philadelphia for CBS. He has worked at ESPN and Fox Sports. So he's got a lot of national experience as well as local experience. And I'm hopeful that we can not only talk about what's happening in sports, what's happening in history, the importance of it, and what we can do about it as individuals, whether you're a sports fan or not. So thank you so much for joining us, Don.
Good to be with you. Thanks for giving me a shout. It's been a very, very busy week. It's been really a historic week in sports and really in our country in so many ways.
NBA teams refusing to play their scheduled games in protest of racial injustice in this country. This is a landmark day in the history of American sport.
The Milwaukee Bucks deciding to postpone their playoff game against the Orlando Magic.
We saw both teams leaving the building, going to their buses.
The Lakers and Trailblazers decided to postpone their game as well.
That thing that happened in Wisconsin.
Jacob Blake.
To see a man shot 7 times in the back with his kids in the car. If that don't upset you, you don't even have to be black.
We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back.
Sitting up and saying Black Lives Matter and sitting up and having these discussions and Zoom calls and this, that, and the other and putting apparel on and like that's not getting the job done. Taking a knee for the anthem, that's not getting the job done. You know, it's starting to get washed out.
Talk about boycotting a game, everyone's attendance goes up and now everyone wants to pay attention.
Meetings were had last night. All 3 teams that were supposed to play today were in agreement that they would be postponed.
They're using their voices. They're wearing the shirts. It's printed on the court that Black Lives Matter. They don't feel like it's enough.
This was all started by the Milwaukee Bucks. They deserve a lot of credit.
You're talking about a team that's right in the thick of a championship chase, they hope. And to do this now, this is as powerful a statement, I think, as we could have expected.
The Bucks, after making that decision, came out and made this statement.
Over the last few days in our home state of Wisconsin, we've seen the horrendous video of Jacob Blake being shot in the back 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha. Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
When we take the court and represent Milwaukee and Wisconsin, we are expected to play at a high level, give maximum effort, and hold each other accountable.
I don't know when they're going to play again, but I know that this was a statement that resounds not only through the NBA, but through the world of sports.
Talk to me a little bit. I was texting back and forth with you yesterday, and you said, I have been so incredibly busy today. Just in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about your day yesterday, but also everything that led to the day yesterday. And as we talk about this is all still unfolding. So this could very well change by the time this show is aired. But as of Friday, what is the latest?
Well, so it's been really kind of a slow burn. That's how the week started. Obviously, you know about Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times in the back, unarmed black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So that was on Sunday. And the NBA is in the bubble, right? They're playing all their games near Orlando, Florida at the Disney Wide World Sports Complex. And a lot of the players, the league is 80% black, were deeply affected by that. Myself included, most people of color definitely felt that in light of what's happened with George Floyd back in May as well. And a lot of players were feeling conflicted about, do we continue to play? Because one of the stipulations for them going back to play during the pandemic is that they, along with the NBA, would use that platform to really highlight social justice reform, highlight racial injustices. And so a lot of guys were feeling some kind of way, like, should we take the court? And so on, I believe it was Wednesday before a playoff game, the Milwaukee Bucks decided not to come out for a 4 p.m. game. So here we are, it's 3 o'clock, and they never showed up for pregame warm-ups. And so you knew something was a little weird because the other team, Orlando Magic, were on the floor. Then all of a sudden you see guys whispering. And they boycott the game. Now, they call it a boycott. Technically speaking, if you look throughout the course of history, it's really a strike. But that set off a whole chain of events. And so now the NBA had to postpone 6 postseason games throughout the course of 2 days. And the players really flexed their muscles and brought NBA management and team ownership to the table and said, listen, and negotiations are still going, here's what we want you to do. We want you to use your power and your influence to make things happen and make things better for Black and brown people. And the Milwaukee Bucks, kudos to them, because when they decided not to play, they immediately got the Wisconsin legislature on the phone, and they're talking to DAs, and they're trying to make things happen. So that's what the week has been like in the NBA. But other leagues seeing that jumped on board as well. So now you have boycotts or strikes in Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, the NHL postponed its playoff games as well. So it's been a crazy week. It has been unprecedented.
Talk to me a little bit about, I follow sports, obviously, but I don't follow it as closely as you do. And I am not the kind of fan that most people are. But explain to people like me the specifics and the significance of this in terms of sports ownership, leagues, money. Could you put that into perspective for us?
Well, I mean, you're talking about billion-dollar industries, so it's not just the sports industry, but when you talk about the NBA and their multi-million-dollar and billion-dollar TV deals, et cetera, a lot is at stake for all parties involved. And I think when you look at the context of our country, what's happened since the pandemic really accelerated in March, people have really looked forward to sporting events as a way to kind of escape. Mm-hmm. And that escapism is now coming really at the expense of Black bodies, really. So I think that's one of the reasons why the guys feel the way they do. And I would say this, Silva, in a greater context, and you worked in newsrooms your entire adult life. I think that a lot of people look at sports as the toy department of life, right? And people are like, I'm not really into sports. But when you look throughout the course of history in this country, sports often drives the bus and is often ahead of social curves, often trailblazing. You think about Jackie Robinson with the Brooklyn Dodgers and breaking the color barrier. He did that in 1947. That was 8 years before Rosa Parks was on the back of the bus. You know what I mean? You even think about this pandemic. The NBA stopped playing, I think it was March 11th, March 12th. They, one of their players tested positive, and they just shut down the whole damn league. And then the rest of the country, days later, followed suit. So sports is often at the forefront of this stuff. So this is why I think it's significant, because now what you're going to see, I believe, is that you'll see other corporations. You may see other employees in different walks of life saying, you know what, this isn't right. And I'm not going to show up to work today. And we are demanding more of people in management to use their influence for greater use. So I would pay a pretty good deal of attention to what's going on in the sports world, because a lot of times it's kind of a predictor of what's to come in regular society.
Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And I too clearly am deeply affected by what's happening. I would like to say that I have been a woke person because of the fact that I have worked in newsrooms my entire life. But there are certain things that a lot of these incidents have also brought to light that I didn't have a perspective about. So I think these difficult conversations are educating even the most educated or most experienced in circumstances. With that said, I have read a lot of different arguments back and forth about all of this. While you say that sports has been in the forefront of setting up history and sort of leading the way and driving the bus to change, one has to wonder, why hasn't the platform been used stronger and more aggressively before? Because this is, George Floyd was not the first guy, and Jacob Blake is not going to be the last. And incidents and racial issues have existed, right? I mean, talking to for a long time. So there's that argument that why haven't the athletes used their platforms as aggressively as some would like to have had them use it?
Yeah, I think that often case in life, there's a flashpoint. There are certain times, peaks or valleys, things that motivate you that previously had not, or there's a straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that in the sports world, it's no different from our society, in the sense that there are a lot of people who are walking around skipping through a field of daisies, not knowing anything about racial injustices until they saw a police officer kneel on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. So I think some of these athletes are the same way. And also, you got to look at it this way. Listen, each generation has a moment. Some more rattling than others. When you look at players where the average age is somewhere between 23 and 27, 28, 30, what was that seminal moment in their lives? Here we are in 2020. What was it? For some of these guys, it wasn't even 9/11. They were too young to really understand. So now this is their generation in terms of age. This is their moment where seeing this rocks them to the core.
So when we talk about athletes taking a stand, we had Colin Kaepernick, who obviously did, and we watched what happened to him and his career. So I think, the other element is that there is certainly strength in numbers, right? So there is a pivotal moment when one person's deep sense of desire to create change is then something happens that you said, that pivotal moment, that moment in history that really creates a shift where it's not just about, he's not the only one speaking now. I mean, you've got all of the leagues now involved. So,
couple points in that. So one, the most, not the most, but one of the interesting things to me is the day that the Milwaukee Bucks decided to boycott, not play their game. It was 4 years to the day that Kaepernick began his protest during the national anthem. Literally 4 years to the day. Now, in the beginning, Kaepernick, during a preseason game, he didn't kneel, but he stood to the side. In fact, he sat on the bench during the national anthem. And then, as the story goes, when consulting, a member of, I can't remember whether it was the Marines, whatever, but a member of the armed forces suggested he kneel because it's a more respectful way to do it, and then it turned into kneeling. But literally, it was 4 years to the day. And I found that it's just interesting that he was trying to bring attention to that 4 years ago and how he got crushed. And here we are 4 years later, A, talking about the same things, and B, watching how the protests have accelerated from a peaceful demonstration to flat out, I'm not playing your damn game.
Right.
So it's been absolutely crazy. But to get back to your other point, one of the things that I find incredibly empowering is the fact that these guys are starting to understand, listen, there are no games without us. So if we decide as a collective to demand things and decide to wield power with our talent, we can do that. And I think it's a really hard thing to learn,
And it's a really hard thing to do because you have a lot riding on this. It's a big sacrifice. You are putting yourself out there and putting your career and we're not talking about a little bit of money. We're talking about a lot of money. So it's a real big risk. It's a chance that if you take collectively might lead to something, but it's not to be taken lightly. And it's not just the NBA. I mean, we're talking about sports across the board here now.
Yeah, and across the globe. And I'll say this, it really did take, it had to be a very specific sport and some very specific circumstances in order for this to happen. Hear me out on this. The NBA, these contracts are guaranteed. There's only 12 to 15 players on a team. They make a lot of money, by and large. But the guaranteed money part is huge. So you don't have not the same as at risk for an NBA player than for an NFL player. So when Colin Kaepernick said, it's different. You're not going to have these NFL players, because in the NFL, they will cut you in a second. There are 53 guys on the team. The contracts are really quite non-guaranteed. There's some guaranteed money, but you could have a 6-year contract and never see 3 of it. So those guys have a whole lot to lose. And your window of opportunity to play, the average football career, is something like 3.5 years. So it really changes the way you approach this thing. And it takes an incredible amount of balls, really, to get out there and jump out front. The NBA, even though it still takes courage, it's different. When LeBron steps out there, let me tell you something. There's not another player in the world better than LeBron James. You're not going to find another LeBron as LeBron goes in the NBA goes. So there's just a certain level of power there that you can't replace. Ownership has no choice but to listen to a LeBron James.
Have you heard any whisperings as to what it is? And that's the other question. A lot of people who may be not informed or understand the finances and the economics of how these contracts and the owners and the players associations work. What could possibly the players demand that could amount to any kind of real change? Can you break it down for those who may not understand the details of the specifics of it?
But I did mention how the Milwaukee Bucks were able to get the state legislature on the phone and kind of use their power in that kind of way. Again, Milwaukee is 50 miles north of Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the incident happened. I think also when you look at it, the NBA Players Association and the actual league they have a very good relationship, which is not often the case in professional sports. So they really do work together. And NBA ownership, for the most part, by and large, has been behind the push of the players supporting Black Lives Matter and supporting other movements. The NBA itself, I say the board of governors, but that's just a fancy term for team owners. They have donated, they have slated some $300 million towards social justice causes over the next 10 years. So we're looking at $30 million. Also, I do believe that this is what the players are thinking. If you were the ownership of the team, if you own the Sixers, you've got any mayor on speed dial, any governor, any senator, any rep. Use that power. That's what these guys want to see.
Right.
It's fascinating to watch.
This is all very, very interesting, because I think if you dig deep and you peel back the layers, you can see how a shift in the way things are done in the world by the birth of the internet, by the birth of social media platforms, by the birth of technology, the shift in corporate driven demands, right? Versus now consumer driven demands. The shift that has happened in the business world and in our lives and is now we're seeing in sports. These are the trickle down effects of that shift. And this new generation is a child of that process where they realize they have the power to then be, since they're the consumers, you can't do this without me. I know this, just like any other client for any other business. You are not a business until I actually buy something from you. And in this case, you really can't make money unless I decide to play for you. So being that consumer driven sort of ideology that has actually, I think, been created because of the technology. This is what we're seeing. This is the positive side of all of that, where we realize we really do have power and we can demand change when it's necessary, when we stick together. How much do you think the fact that the players were in a bubble had to do with what just happened?
That is a great question. I had never thought of that. Here's how I'm going to take this in parts. One, I think the Milwaukee Bucks would have protested even if we were not in the bubble. And I think the reason why is the game would have been in Milwaukee. Okay? So, and they were the team, again, 50 miles away from where Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they were the team to start this, to really spark it, I think that there's a chance that would have happened regardless of the bubble situation. Now, the unity that has been a result of that, I think, this is a unique circumstance. It's just because they're in the bubble. Because the following day, sets of players had meetings. First of all, that night, players got together and they're up until 4 a.m. Okay, huddled up, guys who play in their home regions all over the country. Now you're all in one place, and you were able to communicate and chat face to face. Go to each other's rooms. You're technically not supposed to do that, but you get the point. Yeah, so I think the bubble plays a huge role. And I also think that there's a level of frustration when, again, these guys have not seen their family in about a month, right? Nobody else the bubble until after this round of the playoffs.
Right.
So you're separated from the rest of the world, and what you see is on your social media feeds. You're seeing, black people being beaten in the streets, whether it's protesters shot, etc. And there's just, they see each other and they talk this thing through, and they're just like, you know what, I've had it.
Yeah. Also, I think, there's... Sorry to interrupt. What did you say?
I just said it's a unique circumstance.
Yeah. Also, I think sports historically has been something that we collectively come together to celebrate. Right? And it seems odd to be in that celebratory mode in cheering your team and they're winning during a playoffs when you have such heavy and important and significant and life-changing things happening around you that you need to be paying attention to. I mean, I know that's true for me. I'm, and you can, add to this. I've been really conscious of how I present things into the world, not because I'm conscious of my image, but I'm conscious of how I feel. It just, posting a selfie is not appropriate to when you have a man who shot 7 times in the back. I just, you have to not be of this world and be so incredibly disconnected to go back to life as it used to be,
It totally, it hits you in a certain kind of way. And I think that particularly, in this industry, I can speak for myself, being a sportscaster, I never stopped working during the pandemic. I just stopped going to the studio, and all of a sudden I'm doing my shows from home. Mm-hmm. When the pandemic first hit, we thought, wow, sports news is going to be dead for a while. That never happened. News kept going. And it felt very odd to hear in my ear them talking about news, talking about people dying from COVID-19, etc. And then it's like, what's going on in sports today, Don? And it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
So at times now, it still doesn't feel right. Now, imagine you're an actual player. And you got to remember where a lot of these players come from. 80% of the NBA is black, and not everybody has the urban experiences. The president would like to pretend that it's one, we're just one monolith. But these guys a lot of them are from neighborhoods and from backgrounds that aren't great.
Yeah, and you have to get on the court and perform at your highest capability to do so. And when you're emotionally and mentally not prepared to do that, you're not going to be, I mean, at the end of the day, they might be players, they're still human.
Yes.
Yes. this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people. And in the beginning of the pandemic, when I started kind of absorbing a little bit of that, I realized, oh no, I need to learn and I need to know more about this. So I went back into, once a journalist, always a journalist, it's in your blood. So I went back into doing the same kind of reading as if I was working, right? Somebody could have called me and been like, hey, can you come down and report on this? And I'd be like, yes, great. I'm completely up to date on everything that's happening. And the conversations I've had during the pandemic were while people are dying, and conversations I've had subsequently with what's happening in this country in relation to race, and people talking about, oh, there's just so much negative stuff in the news and I just don't want to consume any of it and don't want to read and don't want to know about it. It drives me insane in how people not only are tone deaf, but will not put the effort in to understand what is going on around them. And that is the only way you're going to know what's going on around them. I'm not telling you to watch Fox News or MSNBC or to read the New York Times. I'm asking you to be an informed individual. Talk to me a little bit about, since you are in news and your focus is mostly sports, but I know that you are a citizen of this world. And the importance of being informed as a person in these times.
Silva, even though my focus is sports, I'm a news junkie. So, I got into this business because I consume news at an absurdly ridiculous rate. And I just want more and more and more. And it's important to know what's going on at the local, state, and federal level of your government. It's important to know what's going on with healthcare, especially given the fact that we're in an election year. All these things are really, really critical, because one thing that, this should all teach us this pandemic is that we are all connected. We are all connected in some way, shape, or form, even if you don't feel it. I always thought that it was interesting that once this thing happened, we heard about coronavirus, people were like, oh yeah, it's over in Asia. Don't worry about it. It's over in China. No, you're good. As if you couldn't get on a flight in JFK and be in Hong Kong or wherever in a matter of
hours,
15 hours. So that's one thing that we all really need to know, is that this stuff is all, it's connective tissue. And one of the things that's so funny you bring this up, that I've always asked myself is, do I want to be ultra informed, or could I live this life where ignorance is bliss? A few years ago, I went out to LA, where I used to live, and I'm visiting friends, and some of them were just kind of bouncing around, like enjoying their lives. Like, the biggest issue they were going to have that day was, do I get oat milk in my latte, or do I get almond milk? Like, what? They're out of oat. This is tragic. And I'm like, what world is this?
Yeah.
What world is this where I'm obsessed over, police brutality and city corruption? And it's a struggle, man. It's really hard on your soul. And so it's a question that I ask myself a lot. Like, would I be a lot better off mentally, emotionally, if I could just unplug?
Yeah, I think it's important to unplug and self-care and do all of that just for your own sanity. I'm not talking about unplugging. I'm talking about being an informed citizen. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I want to have a conversation about how important it is to understand your individual power in these times, right? And while the news is negative, because let's face it, there's a lot of horrible things happening in the world. While some outlets are more skewed one way than another, while some will pump out fake news versus others will fact check, while all of those things are true, it is never before has there been a time where we as individuals have a responsibility to know what is going on around us, because only by understanding what is happening around us will we be able to then take on the responsibility and understand the power we have in order to be part of the change and part of the movement. And that is really what it comes down to. Are you going to be part of the change, or are you just going to be in the space of ignorance is bliss? And the importance of that is, this is why I wanted to talk about this. Yes, we're talking about sports, and this is a significant moment in history. But if there's anything that the NBA players and all of these athletes have shown us, is the power we individually have as well. And they have the different kind of power with the money and influence and people that they know. But on a smaller scale, I think it's important for us to talk about how all of that is a representation of the kind of power we have too. We have it with our vote. We have it with our social media platforms. We have it with the people around us. We have it with the people that we know. And I want you maybe put into perspective a little bit on the individual power that we have and how and what can we do to support being part of this change that's happening.
Well, I think in order to be a part of the change, you have to want to be a part of the change, and you have to be motivated to see change and see a purpose for it. Something that has been incredibly obvious to me is that, the term white privilege has been thrown out a lot over the last several months, obviously, given what's going on in our country racially. And, it offends a lot of people, a lot of white people when you mention the term. Because people feel like, oh, I work for this, what do you mean I'm privileged? But white privilege comes in many different forms. And one of the forms that it comes in is the absolute privilege of being blissfully ignorant, because these things don't impact you the way they impact people of color.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that, as a black man, is sort of frustrating, is because I don't get to check out. And I know that's been something that I've been thinking about so often, like, how can I just go a day of not checking news? I can go a day, but I can't go much longer because I know this stuff deeply impacts me.
Yeah.
Even when I want to check out, I can't check out. It's a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
Being a minority in this country. So you don't have the privilege of just being like, election's coming up, I might vote, I might not. It's not a luxury I have.
Yeah.
So that to me is something that has been starkly, something I've always known about, but it's been very apparent over the last several months, is that there are people out there who have privilege, and that's part of it, is that you don't have to worry about this stuff. While people are out protesting and marching down the street.
No, you do have to worry about the stuff. You're not paying attention close. And you know what? If I come across judgmental, I am. I mean, that's the truth. Is that if you're not paying attention to what's happening around you and don't understand the trickle down effect of how this is going to impact you, when this isn't about do this or do that. This is about understanding how the politics that is going on internationally and nationally, how that's going to have a trickle down effect to your pocketbook, to the quality of your life, to the quality of how you're able to do things to your children, to the generations to come. And if you don't do enough reading and understanding and absorbing information, you don't understand the trickle down effect and how everything is connected. And I think we have this privilege of being news junkies. We read so much, we can connect the dots everywhere. But if this does nothing else, I wanted to explain and talk about the power that the athletes have been able to use to just bring the powerful people to the table is an awakening and another example of how we all have our individual powers as well. How are you doing? How have you? Because I know part of being in.
Before we get to that, I just want to say this with regards to being informed and being active. I think that it's important that we all realize and recognize that there are so many different ways to do that. When people were out protesting in the streets in Center City, Philadelphia, and days on end. We're talking like 14, 15, 16, 17 straight days of protests every day. Choppers flying over my house. Like, it was insane. There's a part of me that felt guilty. Like I should have been out there. And I am pretty active in terms of protests and marching and things of that nature, particularly over the last 5 years. And there's a part of me, like I said, I just felt like what are you doing? You're not doing your part. But in that moment, I had to remind myself there are other ways to do this. You can donate to causes. You can spread the word. Mm-hmm. Just talking to your white neighbor who doesn't quite understand, like, wait, why are people looting? I don't understand. To have a conversation, so like, listen, here's why. Mm-hmm. Here's what I think. Here's what my experience is. So there are other ways to contribute to society, and there isn't just here's what you do. So I think that's important. As far as how am I doing? I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. I'm not even going to work. I'm working from home, so it's not like I'm commuting. I don't mean tired in a like physically tired sense. I'm just emotionally beaten down by news and what's happening every single day. Yeah. And that's a pandemic and a racial awakening all at once. You get a little quarantine action going on,
isolation going on, and less interaction with family and friends and the support system. There's a lot going on.
I miss days when I can wake up and feel light and airy and hopeful, unafraid. I miss those feelings. That's the hardest part, is it just doesn't stop. And I have this sneaking suspicion that, as is always the case in news, you've been in this business, as I said, a long time. It's always the tip of the iceberg. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, if you've ever worked, those of you who have not worked in news, maybe I should start the sentence that way. Those of you who have not worked in news, it's hard to understand what we're talking about sometimes, because when you work in news, you're able to see the precursor to things. You've covered so many different things with different ways that the stories have developed, that you develop an understanding of how things transpire and how things move forward and how things develop. And having the experience I have and the experience you have, we can look at something and say, oh my God, this is going to be humongous. And this is the tip of the iceberg. I felt that way. It's the reason why I dove right into understanding what was going on with the pandemic right in the beginning of March, is that when I heard a few things that made my ears go, what? And if you're trained, it's the tip of and I knew at that moment in time it was the tip of the iceberg. And I feel like this is, and I totally understand you being exhausted and tired, and so am I, but the reality is this is our time to take on the responsibility of what so many of the change makers have done before us. And when you think about what they went through in order to create any kind of change, to move things forward, in comparison, what we have to do, and being aware and being informed and participating from the comfort of our homes and donating or posting on social media or showing up to protests is nothing compared to what they went through. So I hope that this episode was informative in helping you understand how sports are connected to our lives and what happens in sports has a trickle-down effect, and that it also gave you a little bit of a window into our lives as journalists, and it maybe lit a fire under you to do more and be more and understand that you too have the power, and if you don't have the governor on speed dial, maybe you have a phone with a social media account, and you can maybe spend some time educating the people who are posting ridiculously unnecessary things about what's going on around them, and act as a source of inspiration for change. So that's my summary for this episode. Anything else you'd like to add, Don?
No, that's it. Just stay active, and ultimately, people, for the love of God, wear a damn mask. Knock it off. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
People drive me nuts.
Thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Come back for another episode next week. I'm Silva Harapetian. See you next time.